Hi there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Dylan Kolstad Show. Today I'm joined by Jay Tikam, the founder and CEO of Vedanvi. Jay, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
It's a pleasure, Dylan. Thank you for the invite.
So, Jay, I always ask my guests to do an elevator pitch. So, imagine I met you in the elevator and you've got a couple of maybe minutes max to tell me who you are and what you do and make me care. What would you say?
Yeah, so we help organizations basically optimize, grow, we free up the owner, and increase exit value by using digital and AI strategies.
Okay, amazing. So, as part of the work that you've done, I mean, you've worked with global companies, governments, institutions, corporates, enterprise level, all the way from small, medium, and large, on the topic of digital transformation, AI strategies, AI implementation. So, you said something to me the other day when I met you, which I found very fascinating, which you said that up to 70% of digital transformations and AI transformations fail. Do you want to just talk to that fact?
Yeah, so maybe just a little bit of background is, as you say, I have a vast array of experience across countries, a lot of in the emerging markets as well as developed markets. And firstly, I think the good part about digital is I use sort of digital transformation as a tool to help organizations and countries drive more financial inclusion. So digital is not just good for profit, but it's also good for impact. And the reason I sort of work nowadays a lot more with SMEs is, we see that transforming SMEs does have an impact across the organization. Now, the interesting statistics, so I think McKinsey and various other, even Harvard did research, and this figure of 70% comes out very consistent around digital transformation failures. And now I believe with AI, given that we're in the kind of a hype cycle, which is coming to a peak at the moment,
Yeah.
the failure rate is even higher. And I think there's a real big one common reason, because I spent a lot of time kind of understanding why this is the case. And if you think of digital transformation, the word digital comes first and transformation comes later.
Mm.
And that's the reason why I think there's a high failure rate. Because people are approaching digital transformation with a technology first mindset rather than thinking, okay, I need to change my business, I need to bring an outcome in my business. And what's the digital solution, tool, innovation that I can use to bring that about? So right now, if you think about AI, everyone's chasing AI. And some, people have this fear of missing out. So I've got to do something with AI. So, apps are abound. Every day there's a new app coming out. And in
Right.
the corporate world, there's a new kind of a AI, solution coming out. And so the inclination would be, let's implement that, bring that into our organization, without thinking about how it fits and how it's going to change our mind, right? So ultimately, you're not going to find a huge success rate when you go down digital transformation. It's a solution looking for a problem, basically.
So when we met, I think so. You're talking about digital plus transformation. It's the wrong way around. It should be, is it transformation? And then how do we transform? And I think what you mentioned when we met the first time was why are we trying to transform and for whom? Who are we trying to transform for? And so it was almost like a stakeholder or stakeholder driven transformation, right?
Yeah, so I don't say digital transformation, I say transform digitally. So the word transform comes first, and transform my business. Either I want to grow, so either I want to optimize business, which is kind of the core foundational basics, right? So you just got to run your business better. And in that sense, you're sort of protecting your market share. You want to grow, so you want to grow your market share. And so digital is a way of getting to more customers. Or alternatively, you want to kind of digitally transform, which means you want to go into a different space altogether. So if you think of fintech in the days of financial services, fintech didn't exist before the technology came along. So it's now creating a whole new, if you look at OpenAI, that kind of a company never existed. So it's a whole new ballgame. So yeah, I think, and we do, as you rightly say, we do sort of approach a stakeholder first approach, because digital solves a problem. A problem doesn't exist in isolation. Somebody has a problem. So then we kind of find, okay, who has the problem? and then what is the problem. So we kind of look at the stakeholder mapping first, because an organization doesn't only have customers, right? It has it has shareholders, it has suppliers, it has staff, etc. And if you look at a problem at a customer level, the problem might appear at a customer level, but the root cause might be because staff are not empowered, or because management doesn't have the budgets potentially, or the will, the inclination to do what they need to do. So we kind of have three levels of stakeholders. So first we call them, who we serve, which is the front end, the customer. It might also be, regulators. In a broader sense, it could be the environment as well as your society is who we serve, right? And then we go one layer down, which is the enablers. So these are the enablers that helps the company serve the people we serve. And then right at the end is the influencers. An influence would be your board, for example. It would also be, the regulators, government policy, etc. So if you look at any problem, you could start, for example, let's say if you are in the COVID era, all right, and you wanted to do digital transformation, we would look at those three stakeholder groups and say, okay, which ones have the biggest problem? And at that stage, the staff would have been the biggest problem, right? Because now we have to empower staff to work in through their homes, in a remote environment. So digital transformation takes a completely different turn to when you're sort of focusing on customers. If you, for example, now going and selling your company, then all of a sudden the shareholder becomes your stakeholder, right? Because you want to make sure that there's proper reporting and processes and things like that. So you can see, firstly, we contextualize the problem. We identify where the problem is. And then based on that, we would prioritize and then go and look for a digital solution. So yes, you've got, if I can name any organization, even if it's a one-man band, I'm sure they could list more than 20 up to 2,000 problems that they're experiencing right now. Okay, and every problem could in these days have an AI or a digital solution. Which ones do I prioritize? And so this is kind of a way to say, okay, let's look at the stakeholders. Let's try and list all the problems down, and then we have some kind of a scale of how worth is this problem solving, and what's the effort required. And if that comes out on the right kind of scale, then it's worth pursuing. So you go through that prioritized level. So at least when you're hitting a problem, it's the right problem to solve. It's going to give you the return on investment. Now go and look for a digital solution, which turns the whole thing around on its head slightly, in that now you're focusing on the right thing rather than just trying to fit a technology into a problem.
So who is the problem? What is the problem? So who has the problem?
Exactly.
What is the problem? Or what are the problems?
Yeah. And
what are the digital solutions?
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned three customer groups. You start with who we serve: customer, regulators, environment, society. The enablers, which was the influencers, board, government policy, and the third one was.
No, the enablers is not. Enablers would be staff and suppliers, for example, and partners.
Staff and suppliers.
And the influencers would be the board. Would be the
Oh,
one.
right, that's the third one. Influencers.
The regulators. It could be the association, the industry association. It's anyone who influences the organization. It also could be social media influencers. It could be your press, for example. All of that, public perception, all of those could be influences.
So that's quite an exercise to undertake, literally scope the entire business,
Exactly.
all the problems.
Exactly.
I mean, I imagine that would take a very, very long time. So it makes sense why it fails, because people are starting with the solution and then trying to retrofit it to the problem.
Absolutely.
So for a medium-sized business, what can be done? What should be done? What digital transformation should a medium-sized business be looking at?
So first thing I always say to people is, there's a fear of missing out. So, first thing I would say, the kind of pillar zero is something what I call discovery. So, when a problem hits you, don't jump in and try and start to solve it. That's kind of very reactive, right? So sit back and look at what's happening. So number one, what I would do is I would say, yes, I can see all the tools that are coming on the market, and I keep a list of that, right? So I keep that in my back pocket. Then I look at all the new business models that are coming about that are enabled by technology. So I just mentioned AI. Look in your industry and see, okay, what kind of new business models are coming about that are now enabled by technology. Yeah. And just kind of look at sort of innovation happening in the space. So keep a log of that as you're going on. And what that does is it gives you now a toolbox, right? So you keep the toolbox on the side.
Yeah.
Then I think you go into your business and okay, you've got a lot of problems to solve, but I think you will know quite well, which are sort of the most pressing problems, right? But what I would say before you go down that path, let's just understand who our stakeholders are. So that mapping exercise is relatively easy. And I think very quickly you can say, okay, what are the current staff problems we have? What are the current customer problems we have? What are the current, influencer, regulator, board, etc. problems we're having? And just make a quick list, brain dump, right? A brainstorming exercise with your
Yeah.
team. And then based on that, you come with some level of prioritization. If you know your business well and you bring the right people in, I think that exercise could be fairly quick. If you have a systematic approach, which is kind of what we help our clients do, is we help them go through that process in a bit of a systematic way. Otherwise, as you said, you can get lost.
It seems
Analysis
it's quite a
paralysis.
daunting task, I would imagine.
Exactly.
How do you find how do you get customers to buy in the sense that how do not customer stakeholders, so specifically staff, how do you get staff to buy into this the mapping process, and that when potentially they might see AI and technology is taking away their jobs and they're not incentivized, especially for the bigger enterprises and governments, people might feel threatened. So how have you found, what is the stakeholder engagement process to get that buy-in that's worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, so transparency and openness, I think, is kind of the first pillar, I would say, is very important. So if people know why you're doing something and how it's going to impact them, and if you take away kind of the risk to say, okay, look, this is not here to fire you, this is here to make your life better, which is mostly the case with digital, then I think people kind of buy into it. It's normally, I find, I mean, the bigger the organization, the more, you'll find kind of secretive discussions. It's a secretive discussion from the perspective of, okay, the guys at the top haven't thought about a communication strategy. So the people at the lower end, I've worked in corporates and governments, people in the lower end feel, okay, this is a secret now. And whenever there's that suspicion, then you get resistance, right? So I think the why is very important, because at the end of the day, if people are working in a company, they want a better future for themselves, but they also want the company to succeed, right? Because
Yeah.
when they're having a barbecue with their friends over the weekend, they want to say, I'm working for a company that's growing. Wow, my company is growing 40%. Nobody will be embarrassed to say that. So I think communication is the big issue, and obviously if people don't know why, and all of a sudden decisions are sort of pounced on them, that's one problem. Number two, I think, is involving them, right? So if you identify your stakeholder as staff, you can't sit in a boardroom and try and say, okay, what's the problem staff's having, right? If you don't even know how they're sitting daily, who's who in the zoo. So you have to go out to your customers. It's like when you see customers, for example, everyone understands you need to do focus groups and that. When it comes to staff, somehow people feel like they make the decision in isolation. And it's, rarely you're going to get the insights you do. So especially when a customer's serving a client, you would never get that insight unless you go and spend time with them.
Yeah. I think that's the main thing, is that a lot of companies are so far removed from their customers, and senior management are so far removed from their staff that they're really not aware of what the real challenges are. And I think there's huge benefit, as a marketing manager, marketing director, commercial director, to actually still go out there and be, spend time on the floor, spend time in the factory, spend time with your staff, go undercover, work at the front desk, visit customers, go out with sales reps. I think it should be compulsory for all senior management, business owners, to do that sort of exercise, to really understand the challenges that people face doing the work, by
Yeah, you see,
literally.
so if you went through the discovery process and now you go in the front line, wherever that is, in the three groups, then you can quickly see, oh, there's a problem here. By the way, I've been tracking the solution. You can see now you're starting to fit the
Mm,
problem into the
right.
solution already. That's why the discovery is so important. Or you'll say, oh, I realize a company like X, Y, and Z that just came on the scene, a new startup is doing it like this. So you can see the discovery is so important. So
So,
it's a toolbox you have in the background. You don't do anything with it until you find the problem that's worth solving.
so what are some of the ways that you've seen that digital transformation has helped businesses solve a problem? Do you have some
Yeah, so
examples?
as I say, there's three kind of outcomes of digital transformation, as I said, so the one is this sort of just optimization. If I could draw a diagram now, if you think of a circle, your market, you've got a slice in your market, right? Optimization basically is, I basically try and protect that margin, right? Because if you screw up, then customers find out and your market share starts to drop, right? So the first one is just being efficient, doing things more effectively, etc., just to kind of stay in the market. The second one is, okay, how do I increase my slice? So now you start looking at digital solutions as a way to woo more customers in, right? So you might have different ways of serving customers. You might have different digitally enabled, products. You might now target, the misconception always is that, younger people are more digitally tuned. But having said that, I think I've seen across the globe that older people are just as digitally tuned. Right? So now you have a different channel of reaching customers. If you were in Africa, where we both come from, being in the rural world now with telecoms, you can now reach. So that's kind of the growth strategy. And now, if you think of the digital transformation, is how do I change my business to with the help of digital. So fintech is a good example, right? So a bank now starts to introduce fintech like products and services. As a small business, you can start to think, okay, what is a digital solution that I can bring that changes my business? So it's not doing the same thing, it's doing something different. So if you were a retailer, then and you're selling through bricks and mortar, now going online is a whole new proposition, right? You might create a different brand. You're now in the online business versus bricks
Mm,
and mortar. It's changing your business slightly. So that's possibly a good example. If you were an accountant, I don't know, you might sort of create a network of accountants with a centralized system, and then you have a franchise model. So you can
mm,
see it's a different, so digital transformation truly is, transforming your business model, and your business shouldn't look the same as it did before. So if you're a
mm,
fintech company, you don't look like a bank, right?
mm.
That was mainly what I sort of worked in the fintech space. And fintech companies look very different. Revolut
Yeah,
looks very different to a traditional bank.
yeah.
So it's creating that sort of, it's kind of, I suppose what digital does is it gives you that, idea of what's possible, and then digital makes it happen. If you think of the power of AI these days, there's a
Yeah.
huge amount of sort of innovation that you can do that you couldn't
Mm.
before.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I think that's amazing. So I think in closing, I mean, this has been really, really helpful. I've made copious notes as I do. Always so interesting speaking to you, Jay. You're just a powerhouse of knowledge and experience. I think in closing, what would your first, if CEOs are listening to this, what is the first thing, the most impactful thing that they can do for their businesses in terms of digital transformation, would you say, if you could just get one thing going at all the companies you've ever been consulted?
First thing I'd say, don't panic. Because there's a lot of panic and fear of missing out at the moment. Everyone feels they have to do something. This is not a trend that's going to disappear. It's a trend that's going to continue.
Right.
Yes, it is competitive,
Mm,
but I describe digital transformation as it's at the moment. If you think of how people think, if you think of trains, you're staying at a station, and you think of trains, right? At the moment, people I need to jump on a train, right? I don't care where it's going.
mm,
Broadly, I know the direction. It's going north, south, west, east, right? But I just got to jump on a train. And that's what people are doing. They're just jumping on. And what they're ending up finding, that's why digital transformation fails, is they end up in a completely wrong place where they intended to be. So take the time, look at the timetable, look at the boards. That's the discovery process. Understand where you want to go. That's the problem solving, and then jump on the right train. Is what I would say. So yes, fear of missing out might get you in a completely wrong direction. Sometimes it's better to just wait, which will actually get you in the right direction.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jay. You've been super, super helpful. I'll share with all of our listeners and viewers your contact details if people want to reach out to you.
Sure.
And we're also going to have another podcast conversation about the way that you help medium-sized businesses master the tendering process. And I'm very, very, very excited about that and looking forward to that. So
Yeah,
we'll
absolutely.
have
That's
you
a
back again.
new project that's coming up, and look forward to speaking to you about that.
Lovely. Thank you, Jay. And thanks again to our listeners. Please like and subscribe, and please comment, and please share. We would much appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Have an awesome day and be awesome. Bye.